So good morning. Being that we're just ending the month of Adar Rishon and going into Adar Sheni, I thought it'd be appropriate to address the inyan of simcha, joy. Since it says Mishanichnas Adar Marben B'Simcha, when Adar enters, we increase in joy. So there's this klotz kasha. You know what a klotz kasha is? An obvious question. How can you command somebody to be joyous when joy seemingly is an emotional state? You can command someone that even if you're not in joy, you're not happy, or you're not in a good mood, you should still do a mitzvah. You should still be kind to people. But how could you regulate an emotion? And here we say that Adar comes, we have to increase in joy, whether you're in the mood or not in the mood. And in general, we know there's the mitzvah of Ivdus Hashem B'Simcha, to always serve God with joy. We have many verses. Tachas Hashem Hashem Elokech B'Simcha V'Tuv Levav. All the negative aspects and also the positive, that we have to serve with joy. I'm sure you've heard hundreds of speeches and classes about being joyous and happy. But as I said, the obvious question is, how do you regulate an emotion? As I said, you can regulate actions. And despite your mood or despite your feelings, you still have to act a certain way. But to tell somebody they have to be joyous, what happens if you're not in a happy mood? How do you force yourself to be happy? Or b'simcha? So, there's a similar question that's asked about another emotion. That is the emotion of ava, love. So you find the Torah, there's two mitzvahs. V'haftas Hashem Elokecha, we say every day in Shema, a number of times, to love God. B'chol levavcha, b'chol nafshecha, b'chol meidecha. So they're the same question. You could say you have to listen to God. You have to follow His commands and guidelines, even if you don't feel love for Him. But how do you regulate a feeling? And the same is the next mitzvah of Ava, which you all know, V'ahavta l'recha kamocha. To love your fellow. The basis of all of Yiddishkeit, as Rabbi Akiva says, Zeh klal godel b'Torah, it's one of the Yud Beis Psukim and Mar Chazal. Hillel says in the Gemara, the famous story with a potential convert, and he asked Hillel to teach him the entire Torah standing on one foot. Shammai rejected him, because how could you teach the entire Torah standing on one foot? That's not, you can't learn anything standing on one foot. But Hillel responded, essentially, he just said in the negative. He said, Mada'olach Sani, what you dislike, Sani in Aramaic is like Sina, but you dislike, L'chavercha le'savid, do not do to your friend. That's the entire Torah. Idach Perushahu, Zil Gemer. That's the entire Torah. Zui Kol HaTorah Kuli, he said, this is the entire Torah, and now go study. So there you have, you meet a person, a Jew. So some people you like, we all have people we like, we gravitate to, we associate with, we relate to them, and there are people we just don't. I'm not saying you dislike someone, but let's say you just don't like somebody. How exactly are you supposed to like somebody? Either you like them or you don't like them. You like everybody? Anybody here likes every person you meet? And then there are actually some people who may even turn us off, who behave in ways that are you don't want to associate with. Obnoxious, or they have qualities and virtue and values you don't want to be connected with. Okay, so the Torah could say, even if you don't like that person, don't do anything bad to them. Don't speak badly about them. That can be regulated, because it makes no difference. That's your feeling, is in your heart. But your action, that you can control. But how could you tell someone not to love someone? To love someone like you love yourself. So this last question, both about Avos Hashem and Avos Yisrael, two Avos, is actually answered by the Magid, the Mezuzah Magid. Here's what he says. He says that the mitzvah is not on the love, but the mitzvah is on the hisbonenus, to contemplate on things that bring you to love. So it's true, on your own, some things you like and love and some things you don't. But with contemplation, you can come to love even things that may initially not be something you associate with. Let's start with Avos Hashem. The Rambam puts it this way: Keitzid Yaveh Adam. How does a person come lahavosei or lirasei, to love and to be in awe of God? So he says, Kishi is beinin, when a person will contemplate b'gdelis habeira, b'gdelis hanivroim. When you look at the world around us and you see such grand design. Let's be even more specific. Look at your own body. Look at your own system. The fact that a healthy person, do you know how many miracles have to happen for you to work, function? We take it for granted. Do you know, for example, it takes an average person breathes in and out 18 times every minute. You even think about it. But God forbid you go to a hospital and you see someone who's struggling to breathe, and they need a machine, you suddenly realize, 1 second, how many things have to work properly to take one breath into your system and to exhale? If it didn't work exactly exact, and it's hundreds of thousands, if not systems at work, levers and all the different nerves and blood system and the lungs, etc., God forbid, we wouldn't be able to live. What is it? That even though you meet someone, you may not like that person initially, but if you think about who they are, you start realizing Hashem created them for a purpose. You start thinking of their qualities, their virtues, their milas, and so on. You suddenly say, hey, something to love. If God loves that person, and God created me, and I love myself, maybe there's something in that person also of value, because as they say, God does not create junk. So again, it's bonus. So there are people you'll like on your own without thinking. But the mitzvah is that you should contemplate every neshama has special qualities. Anyone created by Hashem has special qualities, and that makes it worthwhile to love that person. I'm sure you've heard the Gemara. One of the Tanoim was walking in the street, and he meets somebody that was very unbecoming, very ugly. It's a very strange Gemara. Then what does he say to the person? How ugly are you? Kama mechur, look how ugly you are. Now that itself is a question. How can someone say something like that, especially a Tana, one of the Talmudic sages? And the person responded, Lech le'uman shasani, go to the craftsman who shaped me, meaning go to God who created me. So there are different explanations. What exactly did he mean? Did he actually mean physical ugliness? Maybe he saw in him behavior that was not appropriate, so he was like trying to rebuke him. It wasn't so much the look. However you explain it, the main point is, why is the Gemara telling us this? Because it wants to say that even when a person may look ugly to your eyes, Hashem created that person. And he's reminded the Tana, who later apologized, obviously, go to the one who shaped me. I didn't create myself. So if a person says to themselves that someone's so ugly and you can't like them because you're basically challenging and questioning God's vote of confidence in creating that person. And what happens if someone doesn't like you? You're also a creation of God. So fundamental principle here is to how do you come to Ava? Through his bonus. Okay? So you could argue, and maybe that's the same case with Simcha. That the mitzvah is not on the Simcha itself, it's on contemplating on things that bring you to joy. Which can include things I mentioned already, Simcha Sachayim, the joy of life because you see the blessings you have in your life. Or it could be other things that bring you to joy. When you're lazy, or you're not thinking about it, you take it for granted, you won't be b'simcha, but then when you realize the many blessings you have in your life, so that's what a person should be doing to bring them to simcha. Now, on an ostensible level, that seems like a good answer, and I wouldn't argue that, it is an answer, based on the Maggid's answer, but there's a few things that still need explanation. Number one is this. Then the mitzvah should have said, the mitzvah is to contemplate on things that bring to joy. Or the mitzvah is to contemplate on things that bring to love. It says the mitzvah is to be joyous. I'm sorry? That's what I just asked. And I just asked by Ava the same thing. Yeah. It doesn't say to contemplate. The second thing, even if it is about bringing things that you think about that bring you to joy, but what about if you can't? Sometimes a person just can't. There are times you could, sometimes you can't. With Ava, maybe you could explain it more because you love something that gives you life. But joy is more than just love. Joy is more than just appreciation. It's also being besimcha. Simcha is a very revealed thing. It's like dancing and celebrating. More than just feeling good. But regardless, even if it is the same, what happens if you just can't? Not always you can contemplate. Sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. So there's more to the picture, and here's the story.
The question is, what if you can't contemplate, or what if you contemplate and it doesn't lead?
Well, the answer for the Maggid is that when you contemplate, it will lead. Because like in this case I just mentioned, if you really appreciate the life you were given, how could you not, unless there's something very wrong with you, because it's your life. With another person, loving another person may be a little more difficult, but the same idea. The truth is that's what Chassidus does answer this question with Av and not with Simcha, that when you contemplate, it automatically will bring you to love. That it's a given. And the reason that the mitzvah is on contemplation is not on the mitzvah is on Av, because the contemplation is just a tool. So in other words, when it says love God, love Hashem, love a fellow, it includes whatever it takes to bring to love. That's one of the answers given in the fact why it doesn't say contemplation. Because contemplation is just a tool, like anything. It says keep Shabbos. It's obvious to keep Shabbos, you have to do a lot of things. So once you say love, you do whatever it takes to bring you to that state. But still, if you think about it, it always can use more explanation. And here's a fascinating insight into who we are as human beings. And something most people don't even think about. Here's the question, a reverse question. Is joy acquired or inherent? Is it something you acquire? Like, for example, education in school you acquire. You would not know certain things unless you were taught. You learn how to drive a car, how to ride a bicycle, how to do other skills. These things you're not born with them. They're not inherent. For example, what's inherent? Vision in your eyes. A newborn child may not see so clearly yet, but the vision is there. A little later, they don't have to be taught to look at things, other things that are inherent. So simcha, an inherent state, meaning it's the way we were born, or is it something we acquire? And obviously, if it's acquired, that's where the bigger question is, because how do you acquire it if you are not in the mood, like I said? That's one thing. The second thing, what is the natural state of a human being? 3 options. Are we naturally sad people? Are we naturally neutral people? Or are we naturally joyous people? And the answer is the last one. We're natural, joyous people. Joy is not something that's acquired. It's not something that comes to you, something you buy or you learn. It's something you have inside of you from the moment you're born and even earlier, as we'll explain. And it's your natural state. The first proof for that is you don't even need to look anywhere. Just look at newborn children. Did you ever see a newborn child born sad? Except for rare exceptions. One second. Except for very rare exceptions that are so rare you can count them in your hands, where there's some disease, or some type of abnormality, every child is born naturally happy. And you see it in the way they behave. You all have little brothers and sisters, I assume. And I'm sure I don't know if you remember when you were newborns, I don't, but we all were once. If you ask your parents, a little child is naturally exuberant. Obviously, a little thing, you take something away from a child, the child can have a tantrum or cry, but that's not their natural state. It goes away very quickly. They explore, they're uninhibited, they have natural joy. As a matter of fact, the most natural joy a human being has is a child's joy. Every other joy, we're already considering what others are going to say, what do they think, what are we going to look like. People don't just let go and just celebrate. Maybe with your close friends you do that in camp or you go on a trip. But you're not going to behave that way in the street. You're not going to behave that way with strangers because we control ourselves. We have discipline and we don't want to look good. We don't want to appear like looking weird and strange. Children don't have any of these issues. They're uninhibited. And you see children, on the contrary, parents have to constantly rein them in, not to go here, not to go there. They're constantly giggling and they're constantly looking for adventure in a way. They're free abandon. I'm not saying they're always laughing and always simcha, but their natural state is a joyous state. And if you want to make them sad, that has to come with an effort. You do something that can sadden a child. But the natural state of a child is joy. Why is that? Because that's how Hashem created the neshama. The neshama is a naturally joyous entity. We say every morning in davening, right after Moedani, Shachzata bi neshmasi. Then we say a few paragraphs afterwards. We say Neshama shenasata bi tahirahi. The neshama you've given me is pure. because it's godly, and it's not affected by life. So the neshama in its natural state is a joyous state. Not only that, as I'll explain in a moment, a neshama naturally sings and relates to song without any training. So neshama is naturally besimcha. And because it's a piece of God, and godliness makes it feel completely at peace with its own self. Because at the end of the day, joy is not just an external. We all know that you can fake joy. Real joy comes from within. It's a sense of belonging. It's a sense of fulfillment. It's a sense of just being, that you are significant. And just a natural joy that comes from that. So where do children then, how do people suddenly become depressed or sad? We learn that from adults. We're not naturally that way. We see our parents get disappointed. We learn disappointment. We learn that to go away from our natural state. Even if you grow up in a healthy, beautiful, joyous home, obviously you will be a joyous human being without effort. Unfortunately, if you grow up in a dysfunctional home, and no one should ever know of that, or abusive home, where people are upset and angry parents, and they're constantly bitter and complaining and criticizing, what do you think happens? You don't have to be brilliant to understand that an impressionable child is going to be directly impacted by what it sees around it. And that, sadly and tragically, takes a natural, joyous child and turns it into a either angry or bitter or sad or depressed one. So the natural state is simcha. And here, listen to this. Chassidus and Kabbalah explain that a neshama, the only way it travels is with nigun, with a song. If you ask somebody, how does your body travel? So the body travels through, has legs. If you want to go quicker or faster or to farther distances, you need a car or a vehicle. But how does a neshama travel? The Alter Rebbe asked this question. Neshama doesn't need a physical vehicle. Neshama travels through a nigun. That's why you find in Tehillim we have the Tezvav, the 15 Shir HaMailas. We say it in davening. What's Shir HaMailas? You know what Shir HaMailas means? The song of the steps of the ascents. There were 15 steps in the Beis HaMikdash, and for them to go from one step to the next, you needed a song that the Levim composed. A person can have millions of frequent flyer miles, and their soul has not moved for 10 years. And there's another person who can sit under a talus or in one space and spiritually move millions and billions of miles. Because movement, when you say someone moved me, you say this song transported me to another time and place. That's what song does, right? Words usually don't do that, but a song can take you to another place. It can remind you of a beautiful memory, of a sad memory. It can make you cry, make you laugh, it makes you dance. Song is natural to us. No one ever has to be taught to sing. No one has to ever be taught to be touched by a song. You may have to be taught to play an instrument or to sing a song, but to be touched by a song? So the big question that scientists ask, and everybody asks, where do children know song from? No one ever taught them. Language, you could say, they pick it up. They mimic their parents. Even that's quite miraculous that at age 2 or 3 you're already able to just have words. So there's explanations for it because words are in the soul, just a matter of revealing them. But song, even if your parents never sang a song to you, your child will respond to song. Listen to this study. Experiments have shown that they take tests, sonograms, of a fetus in its mother's womb, and you know what? They play a song, the fetus moves. Its arms and legs have been witnessed more than once to move to a song. I've talked to many doctors and scientists. No one has a clue why. How does the fetus know song? Chassidus answers the Torah and the Chassidus answer the question. Because in Neshama, Ilamayla even, in Gan Eden, its only language is song. It only knows song. It doesn't know words. So when Neshama comes down below, and it spends 9 months in its mother's womb, song is its natural place. So when it hears a song, it immediately responds. It's inherent. It's not acquired. And Shira and Simcha, of course, go hand in hand. So you probably all know the Gemara that says that a child in his mother's womb is taught the entire Torah. Each of us was taught the entire Torah, b'mei imay, in your mother's womb. Now today we know with tests that you look inside of you look with a sonogram or other way of testing a womb, you're not going to see an angel there with a candle teaching Chumash to a child. So what does the Gemara mean? Obviously, it's not just a metaphor. It means, very simple, think about this. Just like the physical body miraculously develops in pregnancy, so does the life of the child. The personality doesn't begin when the child is born and emerges from the womb. As the child is developing physically, it's also developing the genes, the characteristics, including the soul. And basically, you can say Hashem is downloading into the neshama its divine destiny, which is the Torah. The Torah is the blueprint that God used to create existence. So the Torah is basically embedded inside of the soul throughout pregnancy. Then the Gemara says, an angel comes upon birth and makes shh. That's why we have a cleft. You can't see mine because it's a mustache, but if you look, there's a cleft right above your top lip. The cleft is the indentation of the angel saying shh, making us forget what we studied. Okay. So the question the Alter Rebbe asks, what's the point of teaching the entire Torah and then making you to forget? Doesn't make sense. You see, he answers, consciously we're made to forget. But our superconscious always knows. And that's why children have instincts. We relate to song. We also relate, even a young child can sense danger. Now still, a child needs to be protected. A child is still naive and vulnerable. But children have a sense of right and wrong that needs to be cultivated. It doesn't have to be given to them, it has to be cultivated. Think of a great musician, or a great artist, or a great writer. They don't become a great writer. They're born with that talent. Then you cultivate the talent. It's very different. Think of a garden. The gardener does not create the fruits and the flowers in the garden. The gardener makes sure to cultivate the ground, water it, weed it, get rid of toxins, get rid of worms or other things that can destroy the field. And then what happens? It emerges. Nobody can create flowers. It's the natural power of earth to do so. You plant the seeds, you cultivate it. The same thing, each one of us is born with resources, tremendous amount of resources, all the way from the time we were in our mother's womb. And as they say, since then it's downhill. As good as Beis Rivka the school is, the school in your mother's womb was better. Because it was direct from Hashem, without human beings, and teaching you everything you'll need to know in life. However, you're made to consciously forget, and now your work is to access it. So now let's think about the mitzvah of Simcha. The mitzvah is not create joy. It says access the joy that's already your inherent quality, inherently within you. If the Torah was saying you have to go find it, and you say, I'm not in the mood, or I don't know how to find it, or the contemplation isn't working. But if joy is your natural state, whether you know it or not, and the Torah is telling us always how to be our best that we can be, the Torah is not imposing upon us rules. The Torah is telling us how you can be the best you can be. That changes the whole equation. How do you translate mitzvah and avera here? What would you translate? Most people, mitzvah is a command, right? And avera is a sin, right? Chassidus says that's not really the translations. It is a command and a sin, but mitzvah comes from the word tzivui, tzav. Tzav sevechibur, it means to connect. You've heard this, I'm sure? And avera, you know what avera means? From the word havara, it means to disconnect, to move away from. So think of it this way. Torah and mitzvahs, many people think, is a set of laws. Since a human being doesn't know how to behave, or we're not disciplined, or we're selfish, so the Torah is telling us, just like the government tells us, red lights, green lights, here are the laws of the land, the Torah is telling, here are the laws that God gave us, how to behave. It's much deeper than that. When it comes to red lights, green lights, or paying taxes, or other laws of the land, those are man-made laws that make sense to coexist. But the Torah is the exact opposite. How's it work in the Torah? It goes like this. Hashem created the world. This creator of the world gave us a blueprint by which he created this world. So think of a machine. You come home with a good new computer or a new other machine, an appliance. You have an operator's manual. The operator's manual, written by the engineer or the architect, says, do these things to make your machine work well. Don't do these things not to destroy the machine. So the Torah is not coming and imposing laws for us to coexist. It's telling us what makes the machine called life work best. Basically, the Torah is God's life's operator's manual. So a mitzvah is connecting you to who you really are. It's like aligning you. And Aveda misaligns or disaligns you. So if you want to be aligned to your most natural self, you follow the mitzvahs. If you want to, God forbid, be disaligned, you don't follow, or you do the things the Torah says not to do. Would any healthy person put their hand in fire? No. Here's an interesting halacha. You know what a shemer chinam is? Let's say you go to your neighbor and say, I'd like you to watch over my property. I'm going away for a week. In the olden days, property included could be an animal, a behemoth, a cow. Now, if you said yes, you have certain responsibilities because you accept the responsibility to watch over. For example, the animal goes and tramples on someone else's property, you're responsible. If the animal gets hurt, you're responsible. Here's the question. What happens if an animal walks into a fire and burns, gets injured or dies? Are you responsible? Now, if you walk the animal down a cliff, of course you're responsible. Why are you walking the animal down a cliff? But a fire, the answer is no, you're not responsible. You know why? Because no healthy animal would ever walk into fire. And the owner never told you that it was unhealthy, an insane animal. So you watched out for things that are normal, that an animal may do. But something that an animal jump into fire, how would you ever expect such a crazy thing? So the Rebbe brings this in regard to, same thing with a human being. We say, Ein Adam Ever Avera Elim Ke Nichnas Bei Ruach Shtus. Person doesn't do a sin unless they have a moment of insanity, a spirit of craziness. The question is why? We all do sins, and we don't have to be crazy to do an Avera. You just have a temptation. Like that woman came running to Rav and said, my son went crazy. He's dancing with shiksus and eating chazer. So the Rav said, that's not crazy. If he was dancing with chazerim and eating women, that would be crazy. Because it's a normal thing. A person has a type. You have to control yourself. And yet the Gemara says it's meruach shtus. Why? Because doing an Aveda is exactly like putting your hand in fire. No normal person would do it. If you put your hand in fire, it's either you don't know it's fire, or you don't know the fire burns. So it's a blindness Hashem made that we should have free will. He doesn't let us see the consequences of our behavior. So you can behave in a terrible way, and you will not see the consequences immediately. So that's why it's ruach shtus. It's a moment of blindness, a moment of insanity. Not that you could use a plea of insanity in court for doing an Aveda, but nevertheless, the fact that you can do something that was self-destructive, who would do something? And who would avoid doing a mitzvah when you know the mitzvah nourishes you? It's like someone said, I'm not going to eat, I'm not going to drink. Something's wrong if a person doesn't want to eat or drink. A mitzvah is nourishment for your neshama. An Aveda is misalignment. Separates your soul from its nourishment. It's like feeding poison to your soul. But we do not see this. And that's why we need a Torah to tell us. So the inherent state of a human being is simcha. We just don't see it. Sometimes we let events in our lives cloud our own natural selves. A bad event happens, a sad event happens. Or it could be petty and foolish. And we say, I'm not in the mood. So the Torah says, it's really you that is besimcha. It's the outer you that's covering up on the real you. And that's the mitzvah. So it comes the month of Adar, what we're told is this. Here's an opportunity. All year round we should be joyous. Tev lev mishta tamid. We should always be simchadik. But especially as this month we get power. And every month, as you know, Zman, time, gives us energy. So just like Shabbos gives us a certain kayach, Rosh Hashanah gives us, Purim gives us a certain kayach, so too with Chedesh Adar, that a certain channel opens up that allows it to make it easier for you to access the natural, joyous you. You are a joyous human being, whether you know it or not. And the mitzvah is to help access that which is there within you. And as the Rebbe says, when it comes to the month of Adar, every day we increase, because Ma'alim B'Kodesh, so it's not just one day of the month, the whole month. And this year, it's a leap year, we actually have 2 months of Adar. So we have 59 days of joy, growing joy, leading into Purim in a few weeks, 2 weeks, and giving us all these opportunities to become connected, mitzvah, connection to the real joyous you. So then when you think of it that way, it answers the whole question. Contemplation is one of the ways, but you're not accessing something new through contemplation, you're actually just uncovering your natural birthright. I want to add one more point. Till what time is this, by the way, to this? 12:30? Okay. And here's the point. It's a very seemingly strange. Do you know why there's a leap year? This year's a leap year. Shana Mubaris. Interesting, it's called a pregnant year. Like I spoke about pregnancy. Why is it called a pregnant year? Because it has an extra month of Adar. But why do we make an extra month of Adar? Does anybody know? I can't hear you. Correct. But let me explain. The Jewish calendar goes by the lunar calendar, which means Purim is always on the full moon, Pesach is always the full moon, Sukkot is always a full moon, Rosh Hashanah is always a new moon. So the lunar cycle defines Rosh Chodesh, which is a new moon. The first cycle, and around the 14th or 15th of the month, is the full moon. Fine. So when is Pesach? You all know. 15th day of Nisan. Full moon. As a matter of fact, just as a side, when Sivas Hashem was first established, in 1980, so they made cartoons. It was called a matzah ball contest, and they had a picture of a family sitting by the Seder, and of course, the cartoonist had a moon outside the window. But how do you paint a moon? How do people make a moon? A crescent. No one makes a full ball. That looks like a sun. So he made a crescent, and the Rebbe pointed out that 15th of month, when you sit by the Seder, the moon is never like this. It's always full. So it's a full moon. That's fine. So there's no problem. So we know when Pesach has to be, the 15th day of the new month, Achedesh Hazel Lachem, as Hashem says to Moshe. This is the new moon. 15 days from now, 2 weeks from now, the Jews will leave Egypt, and every year hence, you'll celebrate Pesach. Okay. But then the Torah adds that Pesach should be B'Chodesh HaAviv, in the spring season, in the month of spring. Here's the problem. The lunar moon, the lunar cycle, as you know, is 29 or 30 days a month. The solar cycle is 30 or 31 days, making the solar year is around 365 days. The lunar year is 354 days and a half, around an 11 and a half day deficit. So that's no problem the first year. So the first year you have Tezvav Sivan, 11 and a half days shorter than the solar, no problem. But the seasons are not determined by the moon, they're determined by the sun. And as such, the next year will be 22, 23 days, then 34 days, approximately, then 45 days. After a while, Pesach will end up in the winter. And then it'll keep moving back, it'll end up in the fall. And then it'll end up in the summer, and then back into the spring. Because the Torah says that Pesach should be in the spring, and it needs to be it's a lunar cycle Pesach based on the 15th day of the month. So from here the Chachamim derived that we have a mitzvah to make a Shana Mubarak. So every 19 years, they calculated very precisely, every 19 years there are 7 leap years. Approximately every 2-3 years. Because every 3 years will compensate for around 30 days, is around 3 months. 11 times 11, like 3 years of a deficit. So every 2-3 years keeps it balanced that it's always spring. Pesach in Israel is always in the spring. For example, the Muslims only have a lunar calendar. The Christians only go by a solar calendar. It's only the Jews have this reconciliation of lunar and solar. But here's the big question. Why is the moon shorter than the sun year? Why is the lunar year shorter? Why didn't Hashem make them easy so you don't have to make any big kunst in here? Should have made the lunar year, should also be, the cycle should be 11 days longer. So you probably all learned in Chumash, as you know, the Eibishter created on the 4th day of creation, Wednesday, he created the sun and the moon. He calls it Shnei HaMe'eres HaGdelim, the 2 great luminaries, right? And then he said, V'samoyer HaGadol will shine on day. The great luminary will shine by day. Moyer HaKotan, the small one, will shine by night. So everyone asked the question, the Gemara asked the question, what's going on here? You said, Shnei HaMe'eres HaGdelim, 2 great ones. Then it suddenly says, one's great and one's small. And the Gemara explains that the moon came with a complaint to Hashem. Said that one king you can have 2 crowns. You can only have one king ruling over the world. Either the sun or the moon. So Hashem said, or better said, one king cannot have 2 crowns. You need 1 crown. So Hashem said, if that's the case, you go diminish yourself, and the sun will be the king, the great luminary, and you will receive the light from the sun. But the Gemara says something very interesting, or actually quite bizarre, frankly. Hashem then has regrets. So he says on Rosh Chodesh in the Beis Hamikdash, bring a korban for atonement for me, atoning for me, Hashem, for causing the moon to be diminished. This is one of the reasons that some of the women don't work on Rosh Chodesh, because women are connected to the lunar cycle. I don't know how the custom is these days, but there's some women will avoid somewhere. It's not like Shabbos, but avoid extra work. Like, bottom line is, the moon, therefore the leap year, is considered a negative thing. It's considered caused by a deficit, caused by a complaint, that till Mashiach comes, is considered a wound of the moon. It's like an injury. As a matter of fact, the Rabbeim were always afraid of leap years. They always saw it as a very, they were concerned when it came to a leap year. So why of all months in the year do you choose Adar, the second Adar, a joyous month, to be double when you're dealing with a deficit? It would have made much more sense that you should have 2 months of Av. Av is a sad month. So you have 2 sad months because it's about the sadness of the moon. Why is Adar chosen? And the answer is the story of Purim. Why is Purim such a big simcha? Not because anything special, great happened that day. It was the opposite. We were saved from literally total genocide. Haman wanted to destroy every man, woman, and child. And in this month of Adar, Chodesh Asher Nepach Lahem, because it was transformed from the darkness to the light, that's why we celebrate. So here's another dimension to Simcha that I wasn't speaking about till now. Till now I was speaking about everyone has natural joy, but here's an additional joy. That even from a negative, dafka from a negative, you come to the greatest joy. Like you appreciate light much more when it comes out of darkness than it comes out of light. I mentioned before, when we contemplate, and you see, God forbid, sometimes how someone's suffering, and you see your life is good, that causes joy, because you suddenly see, don't take for granted your gifts. So Purim is actually a month of joy. It causes the whole month to be of joy, but not a regular joy. A joy that comes out of a deficit. So the same thing, when is the Shana Muberes, Dafka Adar, to demonstrate that not only do we have joy in good times, but even when there's a challenge, even when it's a year that we're reminded of the moon's deficit, and that's why we're compensating for it, we still are joyous. And what do? We add actually more. The moon becomes longer than the sun. Because in the Shana Muberes, remember, it's 11 and a half days shorter than a solar cycle. But what about this year? It's 22 days longer. The lunar, because it has an extra 13th month, we actually have a year. We actually have a longer year. So the lunar, which is a smaller light, a weaker light, a receptive light, becomes more powerful than the sun itself. I'll conclude with one more thing. Does anybody know here why we say the Haftarah? Why do we say Maftir every Shabbos? Haftarah. You know?
Because when they were allowed to read the Torah, they would said to read a portion of Nas.
Right. There was a decree during the time of the Romans, I believe, that you're not allowed to learn or read Torah. So the Jews, who are very smart, came up with a great trick. Usually when we say Torah, we mean all the Torah. They said they took a narrow definition. Torah means Chamisha Chumshe Torah, the 5 books from Bereshis through Dvarim. But Tanakh is not included. So they, instead of reading the Torah, they found a theme of the Torah's chapter or of the time of the year and read that. But here's the big question. After the decree was over, they went back to reading the Torah as we do every Shabbos. So why we still read the Haftarah? The whole reason was only because of a negative reason. Because by Jews, there's no such thing as a negative, and you go back to square one. Something negative happened, it always turns into a double good. So we read the Pasha and the Haftarah. If you look at all the Yom Tevim, Pesach, without Pareh and Mitzrayim, we would never have this Yontif. Purim, without Haman, Achashverosh, and all the Rishonim that lived then, we wouldn't have the Yontif. By Jews, we don't just satisfy that things are good. If things are bad, we don't just say, okay, let's get rid of the bad. No. Things are bad, then we turn that bad into a double good. So it becomes a Yontif on Purim, a Yontif on Pesach, and now we read the Haftarah. So even though there's no more decree, but we remember one thing. We don't remember the decree, but we remember that it caused us to add in Kedusha. So it's another way of causing joy when a person knows how to take a negative experience and transform that into positive. That is a tremendous amount of joy, because then you're indestructible. Nothing can come your way. Because then someone say, one second, How could you say Adar Simcha? There are people, God forbid, who are sitting Shiva. There are people who are suffering. They're in the hospital. They're sick. How could you have Simcha when you're in such a negative place? Because Simcha doesn't mean the opposite of sadness. Simcha means you could be sad and still have a Simcha that God created you, gave you opportunities and gifts. So yes, right now you're technically sad, but you're still a happy, fundamentally happy person. And even the negatives can be seen as sometimes and always as something that can be transformed into positive. So there you have a take on the whole idea of Simcha from Chassidus, which opens up a whole new way of looking at Simcha. Many people think the only way to get joyous is by rubbing or pinching their cheeks till it's red. No. What Chassidus teaches and the Torah teaches that each one of us is naturally joyous people. Just look at children. Perfect example. When you go home today, you see little brothers and sisters. Even if they may seem wild or something, one day Hashem will bless you soon with your own family. So yes, there are times we need to discipline our children, but at times you need to just enjoy them and learn from them. Sometimes the best joy, the best teachers can be our own children, because they can teach us what means unbridled, uninhibited, and unfiltered joy. Just to be besimcha. And when you see that, that can rub off and bring out the child within you, that you too should be in such a simcha-dika state. Everyone have a good simcha-dika chedesh Adar. And I'll see you again next week, I think.